Thank you, Steve. We got a guy who knows a lot about the consumer. We are in Seattle this morning at Amazon's campus in downtown Seattle. We have an exclusive interview with Amazon CEO Andy Jassy out with his annual letter today. And there's so much to talk to you about. Couldn't be more thrilled to talk to you, especially right now. We have the CPI number. You don't focus so much on these. I mean, how often do you look at that number and think this is going to change the direction of my business?
Not that often.
Not that often. But I imagine you do when it comes to tariffs.
We look at all the things that could impact consumers and customers.
So what is going on right now in terms of the way you're thinking about the tariff position? Obviously, the China piece of it is still on, and a huge portion of your sellers and other and manufacturers that are selling through Amazon manufactured in China.
Well, it's hard to know what's really going to happen. You know, there's a lot of flux right now, and what we're going to spend time on, where we spend all our cycles trying to figure out how we have the right customer experience. So we know customers care a ton about selection. We're going to try and do everything we can to keep prices as low as possible for customers, and we're going to ship things as quickly as possible as we can for our customers, and that's what we're going to spend our time focused on.
There have been some reports that you've already started to cut back, though, in terms of buying certain product from China. Is that true?
Well, what I would tell you is whenever you have any threat of any kind of discontinuity, as a team, you have to think about what are the things you can do to help customers. And so we're doing everything we can to try and keep prices the way they've been for customers, as low as possible. And so we'll do things like we've done some strategic forward inventory buys to be able to get as many items as make sense for customers at lower prices. And there are some cases where we have deals we were negotiated that weren't done, where we'll renegotiate terms to make it easier for customers to have lower prices. So we're going to do everything we can to keep prices as low as possible.
Are you seeing, by the way, any pull forward in terms of folks saying, I need to buy? My son, just yesterday, who's been desperate for a new laptop, said, Dad, maybe we got to buy the laptop now because it could cost a lot more later.
You have a smart son. How old is he?
14.
Oh, my gosh. I think, again, it's such little data at this point since, the first set of tariffs came out, and then yesterday there was a pause. But we have seen, we see people have not stopped buying, and in certain categories we do see a little bit of people buying ahead. But it's hard to know if it's just an anomaly in the data because it's just a few days and how long it's going to last. But we're going to do, as I said, everything we possibly can to keep prices low for customers.
Who is going to eat the cost, though? Because I think that's one of the big questions. How much can get passed on to the customer? How strong do you think the American consumer is right now? And how much of it gets eaten by Amazon? How much gets eaten effectively by potentially a third-party seller?
I think we'll have to see how it all plays out. But if you made me guess, I'm guessing that that sellers will pass that cost on.
Fully.
I think they'll try. And I understand why. I mean, depending on which country you're in, you don't have 50% extra margin that you can play with. So I think they'll try and pass the cost on. And as I said, it's so early right now, but we haven't seen any change in consumer behavior in a meaningful way yet.
Is there any change in terms of your own behavior, meaning the company's behavior? And one of the things you're doing is building data centers, for example, and having to invest heavily in that space. Obviously, there's component parts that are coming in from China and all over the world, and how you think about that, for example.
Well, every finished good that's got any degree of complexity in it has parts from all over the world, and that's been true for a while. And actually, in our AWS business, really starting about 5 years ago, we very significantly diversified our supply chain. And so we have components that are from everywhere. It's not just one country. But we have such high demand right now for AWS, and the AI growth is so significant that we don't see any attenuation in demand, and we're going to keep building.
And so it would be depending on what happens with the tariffs, there would be no change to that view.
I don't see us attenuating our building data centers right now. We have very high demand.
Can I ask one related question on terms of data centers? One of the other sort of major shocks to the system was now a couple months ago was the creation of DeepSeek, which was this new large language model that people thought was remarkably more efficient. And there was this view among some that said, maybe we don't need all of these data centers, or we're not going to need all of this processing, as much processing power and as much energy as some had forecast. Did it change your forecast, though, when you saw that?
No, I mean, in some ways, we would like nothing better than to make the cost of AI meaningfully less expensive for customers. The cost of AI today, because of the chips and because of the cost of inference still, even though those have, the cost of inference has come down several times, but it's still more expensive than it should be and than it will be. And then what you need for companies to be able to deploy AI as expansively as they want. And so when DeepSeek came out with this model, which people were excited about, it felt like it cost less, it felt like the inference was less. I think if you're building frontier models like we are as well, you're all working on a lot of the same types of problems, and you're going to see all this leapfrogging. You have seen all this leapfrogging every month, and you'll continue to see that. But for me, the lower that we can make the cost of AI, the more customers are going to use it. And I think people get confused. I saw this in the beginning of AWS too, which is customers love when you take the cost per unit of something down. It allows them to save money on what they're building, but they don't actually spend less. It actually unleashes them to do a lot more innovation, and in absolute, they spend more. It's the same thing when we started AWS. We pretty significantly changed the cost of compute, storage, and database. Customers loved it, but they actually spent more in infrastructure because it allowed them to build more for their customers.
So, but that's something you talk about a lot in the letter, bringing down the cost of compute when it comes to AI. And obviously, you also make an allusion, I don't think you use the word NVIDIA, but I know they're both maybe a frenemy, partner, and a competitor at the same time. They have controlled this marketplace for a very long time. What do you think has to happen to bring the price down? Because I assume that that's going to come from you and AMD and everybody else who's going to try to do this. But how quickly does that happen?
It is going to happen. I mean, first I would tell you that if you sat in the meetings with the AWS team right now, they feel like it's their responsibility and their mission to make the cost of AI meaningfully less for customers than it is today. And I think there are two big drivers of it. One is the chips. And, what's interesting is most of the spend today in AI has been on training, these giant training runs.
Right.
But when you get to scale of the production applications for AI, it flips. And the overwhelming majority of the spend is actually on the inference, which are the predictions from the model. And so the two things that have to happen is the price performance of chips has to be meaningfully less, and that's part of why we built our own chips. We have our own custom AI silicon called Trainium 2, where the price performance is 30 to 40% better than what's out there in the current GPU instances. So we're working on trying to take the cost of chips down, and you have to take the cost of inference down. And that has to do with a whole bunch of things, including techniques like distillation and prompt caching and how you handle different model architectures. So it's both the chips and the inference. They both need significant cost decreases, and we're working hard on that.
One related AI question, which is, last time I think I talked to you maybe a year or two ago, there was a different administration in Washington. We were talking about the possibility that you would consider to buy a company like Anthropic or something like that. You were in the middle of the iRobot situation, and it didn't seem like any deals could get done. In this new environment, do you say to yourself, maybe there's acquisitions that we could make and maybe buy an Anthropic?
We never stopped trying to do acquisitions that we thought made sense for our customers in the business before. But I do think that it's possible this environment will be a little bit easier to start to acquire companies. We'll have to see.
In the letter, you do talk a lot about the consumer. You talk a lot about the culture at Amazon, about trying to bring down prices. You just said you thought that, and you talk about how optimistic you are. You've seen no change in the consumer at all in terms of what they're buying? I mean, we've had conversations over the years where you've said, you know what, actually, I see people going from, bigger screen TVs to smaller TVs and other things like that. Is there no shift right now in terms of what the consumer's doing?
I'd say not a lot in the last, over the last couple of years, off and on, as we've talked about, customers have gotten more careful.
Right.
And they're whenever they can trade down on price, they do. Wherever they can find a bargain, they do. We've seen significant growth on, discretionary items, but not at the growth rate we typically see as people have just been careful. And so that trend has continued. But as I said, we haven't seen meaningful impact yet from all the noise around
But
the
are you
tariffs.
thinking there is? I mean, we've heard, I think Walmart around guidance. You heard Delta talking about how they think that I don't know if it's a slowdown, but not going to grow as fast. We've heard Warner Brothers, I think, is worried a little bit about advertising. I know you're in the advertising business. What does this feel like?
By the way, I completely understand why they companies are nervous right now. And it's so early, you don't know. But the worry, of course, when you have things like tariffs, is that it'll create macro issues where, it depresses demand or it drives inflation. But we just haven't seen it yet.
Have you either been in Washington yourself or had your team in Washington talking to this administration about all of this?
We talk to the administration all the time.
And what are you telling them?
We talk about a broad number of issues with the administration all the time. And so, we share with them different, things that we think matter to consumers, things that we think matter to enterprises. We have some conversations about tariffs as well, and we share what some of the concerns are, and they're aware of them.
One of the things you talk about a lot in this letter is sort of the management culture that you've instilled in this business over the years, and how long you've actually been at this company. But one of the things that you've talked about is this idea of why. That every question starts with why. Why are we doing this? And why? It sounds like really the question is not why are we doing this, but why can't we do something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is the right now? Is there something that you're looking at where you're saying why can't we do something?
Oh, well, I mean, we have so many why questions all the time. I mean, we have this concept inside of Amazon of one-way and two-way door decisions. And a two-way door decision is when you make a decision, and if you get it wrong, you can walk back through that door with little harm. A one-way door decision is when you walk through that door, if you get it wrong, it's pretty tough to walk back through it. And so both those constructs, though, assume that the doors are unlocked. Right. And when you're trying to invent, you're often trying to you're actually trying to unlock a door that seems previously shut tight. And so a lot of times, why is the question that starts to open up that door? And we're constantly asking ourselves why questions. So today, we're constantly asking, why can't we ship items to customers even faster? Why can't we ship items to people who live in rural parts of the country who don't have, it's much harder to get items same day or next day in rural parts of the country. And most of the logistics providers are actually stopping investing in rural areas, whereas actually we're increasing our investment. Why can't we give broadband connectivity to people in rural parts of this country and around the world? Why does AI matter so much, and why do you have to invest the way that we think we should right now? We're asking lots of why questions.
So I'll give you a why question that some investors ask. They say, why necessarily go down some of these roads which might eat into margin, right? Yeah. So one of the questions is, if you were to be able to get stuff faster in rural areas, I assume the cost goes up, or do you think overall it makes the business better?
I think there's no question it makes the business better. And for us, what we're after, and we've talked a lot about this over the years, is we're trying to make customers' lives easier and better every day. And we're not trying to optimize how we do as a business in any one quarter or any one year. We're trying to build a business that outlasts all of us. Right. And when you're actually, what we learn, I get asked this all the time, and we get asked this a lot, which is, haven't you reached the law of diminishing returns on speed? Like, isn't it enough at this point? And I can tell you definitively from the data that it's not. We have not reached that point. Every time we're able to show customers on a product detail page a delivery time that's faster, they actually choose to buy more frequently, and they actually they spend more of their purchasing power on Amazon and make more of their purchases with us when they know they can get it reliably and quickly. So, I think that in any short period of time, as you're quickening the pace with which you deliver, you may have cost increases. But if you innovate the right way and you build the right infrastructure and the right architecture, you actually can relentlessly take your cost to serve down, which we've done over the last several years. And we're very confident we'll be able to do that in rural areas as well. They deserve to get products same day.
Question on cost to serve, or maybe it's cost of everything. When you think about employment at Amazon, one of the things you talk about in your letter is this idea that you want everybody back in the office. You've been a big proponent of that and how successful that's been. I'm curious, though, with the advent of AI and everything that's going on, and you look at how many more people you want to hire in the future, or maybe how many you don't need to, what does that look like in this new world to you?
I think it's so early right now with respect to AI. You're starting to see companies employ it in a really broad way. And they're going to, like everything else, as technology evolves, certain jobs become more important. Other jobs that you used to do with people, you do in an automated way. But we have found over many years that human beings find other jobs to do, that the ones that get automated by AI. So I think we'll have a lot of people for a long time, but they're just going to be working on different things.
I want to pivot back to the news, a different piece of news. You made it a couple weeks ago, which is that you're bidding now for TikTok. Give me the why behind that.
I don't think we said that.
Did you not say that you were one of the bidders for TikTok? It's just been reported that you were one of the bidders for TikTok? Okay. Well, can you give us the rationale for bidding for TikTok then?
Oh, well, we have a long policy, as you know, Andrew, on not commenting on M&A rumors, so I'm going to stick to that policy.
Okay, let me ask you then a slightly different question. You don't need to comment on whether you're bidding for TikTok or not. Do you think that TikTok should be part of part of a chess piece in this tariff conversation or not? Because I think TikTok has always been a question about national security, but it now is also being sort of brought into this tariff discussion.
I don't know. I mean, I think the conversations that the administration is having, probably was having before and more intensely is having now with each country, are complicated. And I imagine that each have their set of variables. And I've read that this may be one of the pieces in that negotiation, but I'm not privy to it.
If this doesn't work out, being a politician might. So it's a good answer. Let me ask you about a couple other pieces of the Amazon business. One of the sort of next legs of the stool for you, if you will, is Kuiper, which is the satellite business. You're putting up a satellite, you believe, this year. It's finally going to happen this year.
We're starting to put satellites in the air this year.
What's that going to cost, and how quickly do you think that becomes competitive, if it does, with Starlink?
Well, I mean, I just start with the need. There are 400 to 500 million households around the world who don't have broadband connectivity. So they can't do things that we all take for granted, like education online or shopping or watching entertainment or doing business. And then there are all these enterprises who have assets in remote locations that they need to communicate with, they can't. And governments need that visibility. And so there is a high need for it. We will have our low Earth orbit satellite. We'll have the first set of satellites up in 2025, with more coming in 26 and 27. I think that people are going to really like the offering. I think that it will have an advantage price point for customers in those three segments. I think they'll like the flexibility and the price point of antennas. And then if you think about it, we have at Amazon, in the three segments that are going to consume this product, we have a lot of relationships with consumers, a lot of relationships with enterprises, a lot of relationships with governments, all of whom are excited about this. And they're particularly the commercial customers, enterprises and governments, are going to want that data to come down into the cloud.
This is the first real competitor, Starlink.
Yeah, I think people are going to really like the offering, and I think they're going to like the connection between Kuiper and AWS to be able to analyze that data and do computing and AI ultimately. And so, very optimistic about it.
How many of the satellites end up going up on Blue Origin? How many end up going up on SpaceX? And is that a concern for you, given that you have to rely to some degree on Elon Musk to get some of this in the air and then compete against him?
Yeah, we have 4 rocket providers, and and all those rocket providers, they're very professional. You have contracts for a reason, and I would say that we have more in absolute going up on Blue Origin than we do maybe in SpaceX. But we have 4 providers, and they're all going to be an important part about getting our constellation into orbit.
Right. 2 other pieces I want to ask you about: Video Prime. And want to talk to you about pharmaceuticals for consumers, because you mentioned that in your letter. Is that the next big leg of your stool, meaning getting into healthcare in a big way? You've been talking about it forever. Yeah. I just don't know if you think there's been some kind of unlock that's happened in the past year.
I think if you look at our Amazon pharmacy business, it's really growing very substantially. And I think that there are a couple of reasons for it. First, if you look, I don't know if you shop in the pharmacy, it's a pretty awesome experience, but the team has done an amazing job the last 2 years or so in changing that customer experience. It's so much easier. You have price transparency. A lot of times you go to the pharmacy, you don't know what something's going to cost. You get to the counter, you can't believe it. And so the experience is better. The delivery is much faster, and then I think people have gotten used to buying their pharmacy items online. If you don't feel well, if you can get it same day, we can deliver same day now in lots of cities around the U.S. If you can get it same day and you can get it actually in a few hours, it's a huge advantage if you don't feel well.
How much are you spending time thinking about tariffs as it relates to pharmaceuticals? Because that's something else the president's been talking about.
Again, it's hard to know where the tariffs are going to settle, but wherever they settle,
right,
we're going to do as much as we can to keep prices low for consumers.
What's going on in terms of video for Prime? You've been investing heavily in sports. Does that mean you're going to invest away from some of the drama and comedy? What does that look like over time to you?
I think it'll be a mix. I think there's a reason why something like 95 of the top 100 rated shows every year are sports. It's kind of the last appointment only viewing. And we've learned it with Thursday Night Football. It's been really successful for customers and for us. And we have the NBA coming in 2025. We have NASCAR coming in just a few months. And so sports has been very successful. I expect we'll continue to invest more there. But we'll continue to invest in shows. I love the new season of Fallout, the new release, and Reacher and The Boys. I think the content continues to get meaningfully better.
The economics of that on a standalone basis, would they work, or does it only make sense in the context of the sort of larger Prime package?
We started Prime Video as something that we thought customers would love and would be very attractive in Prime and would help, convince people to decide to pick up Prime. And then what we find is when people start Prime via video or for video reasons, they actually end up spending downstream in our commerce business, our e-commerce business. But what we have over the last few years with some of the changes we've made and as the business has matured, we actually think Prime Video will be a very good standalone business as well.
Any shows that we need to watch? By the way, First Lady, you have a documentary with the First Lady. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was the people making it shared it with a number of folks. We thought the show was really interesting, and we were fortunate enough to earn it.
Do you think you'll end up getting into the business of news? The reason I ask is you did that broadcast the night of the election.
It was an experiment, and actually it was a really successful experiment. Customers really liked it. I don't know. It's something, it is something that people watch very frequently, as you well know, and we'll have to see.
Okay. Andy Jassy, it's great to have you. Congratulations on the letter. And great to have you on a day like today when we're all trying to make sense of these tariffs, and we hope to talk to you again as all of this plays out. So thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Guys, I'm going to send it back to you. Squawk Box will be back right after the break.